Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm really excited about this session today because I have been preparing a lot for it, and I did a lot of research into hallucinations because I think it's absolutely fascinating subject, and I think you're going to find it useful. Today I'm going to be showing you what I've kind of done some research, as I say, and learned some things about reducing AI hallucinations, and I'm going to be showing you today how to actually do that through prompting and how to improve your prompting to reduce those hallucinations. Before we jump in, I have to introduce myself every time because we have new people. It's good for people to know who I am, obviously. So my name's Holly Cope. I have a podcast called More Than a Lawyer. I used to be a lawyer. Now I have a AI audit and training business where I work with legal teams to do AI audits. I assess their workflows and check where they can actually be using AI, where they can be optimizing their work to save time using AI. And then I train their teams on different AI trainings, basically. Similar to this training, prompting could be to do with Claude. Some firms have asked me to do Claude specific ones because they're using Claude. So that's basically what I do. That's a bit of context around what I do. So I guess the biggest issue with hallucinations is tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is that you use, they just sound really accurate and really right. And I think this was the issue in the beginning, wasn't it? When we first started using AI and everything we said, it came back with something really, really convincing. And the reason why I actually put together this training today is because I did a poll for, I think it was 200 lawyers, and asked them, what do you find most difficult about using AI? And the biggest issue was hallucinations. They don't know when to trust it. They don't know when it's accurate or right. And it's just something that's very confusing to them. So what we're going to cover today, so I'm going to explain to you why hallucinations happen. I've done some research. I've looked at OpenAI and different sources and looked at why this actually happens, because I think we don't realize actually what's going on behind the scenes and how the tools are made and why hallucinations come about. And I think if we understood this kind of processing and the mindset of AI, then it would help us actually find hallucinations and know what to ask it and know what to recognize. I'll be showing you a practical framework that you can use to basically check the AI response. And I'm also going to do a live demonstration to help you improve your prompts as well. So to be honest, there's a lot of really, really helpful tips today that I'm going to be giving away. So I really, really do hope that you find it useful. What is actually a hallucination? So AI hallucinations, I went to IBM, I went to Reddit, I went to other sources to figure out, okay, what is the actual definition of this? And the same type of answer came up. I think probably, most people are aware of what a hallucination is, but I want to just show you what the outcome was of this. So it's basically just where AI sounds confident, it sounds convincing, but it's made something up. It's made up information. It's fabricating information. So why does it actually guess? This is the interesting part, actually. This is a really fascinating part. Why does it not say, I don't know? And it's basically made to predict. It's made to give a response. It's made to be forced to give a response, even if it's making up that response. This teaching to test screenshot was taken from the OpenAI website. And what I found really, really interesting, which helps me get more context behind hallucinations, was it said at the bottom here, let's suppose a language model is asked for someone's birthday, but it doesn't know. If it guesses, it has a 1 in 365 chance of being right. Saying I don't know guarantees 0 points, basically. So it just gives a random response because it's been programmed to guess, as opposed to saying I don't know, which I think is fascinating. And it also, on the OpenAI website, it compared the two GPT models. And what I found super interesting is the fact that the error rate, well, firstly, it's pretty high on the O4 Mini, and the accuracy rate is pretty low as well, like generally speaking. So what I found fascinating was the fact that there's not really any room for 100% correct, answers. That it's always going to hallucinate. So if you have this in your mind, then it helps you a little bit more, and you can find out ways to kind of get around that, which is what I'll be showing you today in a little bit more detail. Put in the chat what you think about that. Did you realize this? What are your thoughts behind it? So obviously this is bad for lawyers. This is not a good scenario for lawyers, because lawyers, we want facts, we want information, and we don't necessarily always follow patterns. So it's hard for AI to kind of keep up. We've got to use human judgment. We've got to use experience. We've got to use different frameworks. And it's not always a one size fits all scenario when it comes to providing legal advice or giving a legal response. You're aware of that. So that's why it's particularly bad for lawyers. And of course, lawyers are scared because you don't want to be the next headline in a newspaper. How many cases or situations have we seen where lawyers have got hallucinations and given them in judgments and gone to court with fake cases? It's a pretty common thing nowadays. So it's something that we want to avoid as much as possible. So what is your biggest problem, would you say? Problem/challenge when it comes to AI hallucinations? What stops you from knowing how to limit them, knowing how to avoid them? I think for me, in the past, I wasn't sure how to prompt and what kind of input to give it to get the best output. That was probably my biggest challenge. So the types of hallucinations. This is something I also found interesting as well. Like what types of hallucinations are there, and what can come out of AI? So we've got fabricated sources. It'll make up cases. This is probably something that everybody here can resonate with. Missing context. So perhaps it's not giving exactly the right response based on your particular situation. False certainty. It's really confident about the wrong answer. That's really frustrating. I found it's the most frustrating thing for me. I prefer it to say I don't know. Incomplete analysis. So 4 to 5 things that matter, and then it doesn't give you that complete thing. So let's say you've asked it to give you 4 cases and it gives you 3 or 10. It doesn't come up with sometimes exactly what you ask it to do, which can be really frustrating as well. Or it misinterprets what you ask it. This is another frustrating thing. Oftentimes, I say to it, no, you've not listened. Go back and look at what I've just said. I'm not asking you that. And I'll be arguing with it. I also find that depending on what time of the day I'm speaking to it, depends on what type of responses it gives me. And it might come up with just some weird things. And I'm thinking it's not as switched on as it is, usually. Sometimes it's super switched on and it'll take everything that I've said and give me exactly what I asked for. And then sometimes it won't. I don't know if you find that too. And then it will distort things as well. So these are the types of hallucinations you might get when you get an output in AI. So how do you reduce AI? So I'm going to give you a framework in a minute, and I'm also going to share with you some examples of how to make your prompts better to reduce the likelihood of AI hallucinations. I obviously have to say that, as you have seen from the OpenAI kind of screenshot that I showed you, there's always going to be a chance of hallucination. So you always have to double check. There always has to be this, human in the loop to double check, because there's going to be a chance if you're using open sources like ChatGPT, like Claude. There's less likelihood of hallucinations in some legal tech software because they try to cut it down as much as possible. I have asked legal tech kind of founders and developers about this exact question. I said, what are the chances of hallucinations for certain tools? And they said, well, it's less so because different ways that they kind of program it and different examples they give it and the ways that they prompt it and these things as well. But to be honest with you personally, I would always want kind of justification from the AI, and I'd always want it to link back to whatever it's referencing for me to be certain, that it's kind of correct. So, okay, how do you reduce hallucinations? So you can give it permission to be uncertain. So you can actually say to it, if you don't know the answer to this question, please just let me know, or ask me some follow-up questions so I can actually give you the answers. It may be in some cases you're not able to do this. Let's say it's a super complicated legal issue or whatever, but let's say it's something fairly simple and all it has to do is ask you questions to verify and just double check the response and the output to make it more accurate. Then you can literally just ask it to do that. You can scrutinize the facts. So you can ask it to give you links, give you examples, or show the workings out, show how has it actually come up with this response. Tell me what your thought process is and why you've come up with this response. You can ask it to do that. I'm going to show you actually how to do it. It's really, really cool. You can lower the stakes of a guess by giving material. You can give it links, you can give it, I don't know, documents, PDFs, perhaps an actual case from, a website, as in like a government website or something like this. You can ask it to check the sources that you give it, and only those sources. I know a lot of people do that here. Simply just changing your mindset as well and just accepting that it won't be 100% correct, and you should check it. And you should have like a system where you double check what it comes up with. So I'm going to show you that in a second. So as I say, you've got to start with the right mindset. Treat every AI output like it's a submission from just a really, really good junior who isn't quite there yet. This is my trust framework. And you can use this every time you are assessing AI, or I know it's a lengthy process, but it's a good habit to kind of keep up with in order to reduce the likelihood of hallucinations. So the first thing is think about the consequences. So what I mean by that is be aware and think about what are you asking it? And you could even come up with your own chart, high risk, low risk, medium risk, and think, where am I on this spectrum? So for example, a high risk thing could be, I'm asking it to actually write a legal judgment here. So I need the hallucinations to be pretty much like really, low, 0, so that when I check it, it's going to be almost perfect. And then maybe a low risk thing would be an email. So I want it to write an email, and the chances of it kind of giving it a random answer are pretty low because it's not a huge task for it. So step number 1 is just assess in your own head, like, okay, how complicated is this task that I'm going to give it? And if it hallucinates, what is the risk to me? And then the second one is, so step number 1 would be review the evidence. Basically, you can either give it information yourself. So let's say it's writing a legal judgment, or it's doing research, or something to do with law. You want to make sure that you give it the resources that you want it to use, whether that's cases, whether that's, I don't know, arguments, something like this. And you want to just double check that it's checking that by prompting it in the right way. Also, you want to know what it's referring to when it gives you that output. So when I say review the evidence, review what it says and ask it to give you evidence of why it has given you that response. Okay, you've given me that response. Great. Where has it come from? Show your workings out, like I mentioned before. And then the next step would be to understand what's missing. Have you left out any context? Are there any gaps? Perhaps there are some blind spots that the AI has not quite considered or looked at, or you've not considered or looked at. And you can do that by just simply asking it to review what it said, and maybe even ask it, are there any assumptions you've made? Well, yeah, are there any assumptions that you have made that are potentially not accurate? And do you need me to kind of give you examples or verify anything in order for you to give me the right output? I'm going to show you how to to do that as well in a second, well, afterwards. The next step, so as I say, it's kind of a lengthy-ish process, but when you get into the habit of doing it, which I'm going to show you how to do, and I do as well, it's actually you just kind of go along with it, and it's not too bad. And then the next step would be to separate confidence from accuracy. So when it comes up with the response, think, okay, are there parts where it's being particularly like confident and perhaps the response isn't potentially accurate? Again, you can do this by prompting it and asking it to review what it said, but you need to kind of have your wits about you and have an eye for that as well. And I guess the more that you prompt the AI, the more you get used to seeing what is actually confident and what is actually accurate, And then the last thing is, obviously, you are the human at the end of the day. You need to double check everything. You need to double check the work and what it said and the output, and make sure your prompt is accurate in order for it to give you the best output that it possibly can. This is the framework. I can come back to it if you need me to, but we're going to actually just dive into some examples now, and I'm just going to give you a demonstration. I'm going to show you examples now of bad prompt, a better prompt, and an even better prompt. Okay. So I'm just going to give you an overview of these prompts, and then I'm going to dive into showing you how to do it. Okay, so this is an example of a bad prompt, and I'm relating it to UK employment law right now. Okay, so that's what I'm kind of basing it on. So you could say to AI, summarize the law on unfair dismissal and provide the leading authorities, as in the leading case law that I can rely on to help me understand this principle of unfair dismissal in employment law. So the reason why this is a bad prompt, it's probably obvious to you, but there's no jurisdiction. I've not said UK law. There are no kind of date parameters, as in I've not said I want the most relevant cases around the kind of time frame of, let's say, 2026 and 5 years before that, something like this. There are no sources, so it doesn't know where to get this information from. And so the chances of this hallucinating and coming up with random things are very, very high, right? That's pretty obvious, I would say. So how do you actually make this better? So if you think about it, based on what we've kind of gone through and what hallucination is and how AI thinks and how it's programmed, there are so many opportunities for it to fill the gaps here and just make things up. So in order to make a better prompt, you have to make sure that you fill the gaps for it and that it doesn't have an opportunity, or it has a limited opportunity to do that. So a better prompt would be using the material I've provided, and then I've given it, let's say, so in the UK, ACAS guidance, which is going to be really helpful for it. It is a reputable organization, which often employers and employees refer to for legal advice. I've got the government, which is obviously super reliable. I know that I'm going to give it some really, really reliable sources here, and it won't have a chance to kind of go outside of that. So if I give it the sources and say explicitly use these sources, then it will not try to fill other gaps, And if you ask it to identify any assumptions that it has made, this is a key factor here. I'm going to show you in a second. It will actually review its own output, and it will think about it, and it will actually tell you, oh yeah, I made an assumption about this, and that's probably not great, which is really funny. Actually, I'll show you it. Yeah, so this is a better prompt. It's not amazing, but it's better because it gives you, it gives the AI an actual source to work from, links to reputable websites and information. You're asking it to be transparent by asking it where it's made assumptions. You have basically given it limited room to do its own thing, shall we say. Before I go into the even better prompt, I want to show you the responses from this. So I've given it the first prompt. I've said, summarize the law on unfair dismissal and provide the leading authorities. So it summarized the law based on the Human Rights Act. Okay, interesting. it's given me a bit of a breakdown, not much context, but it's kind of just given me a very, very brief breakdown. It's assumed the law of England and Wales, probably because it knows that I'm kind of based there. I don't know if it's tracked that through, I don't know, previous conversations, or whether it's like in the settings or something like this. It's probably in the settings. So it's assumed that I may not be referring to the law of England and Wales. So that's interesting that it's suddenly done that. And then it's come up with some cases and the principles around these cases. So it's given me links to these. Okay, and it's given me sources. Okay, so what I would have to do is go into each of these and just double check they're correct. But there's a huge room here, huge scope for it to make up random cases, right? Okay, so this is the response that I got. Obviously, we can't fully trust this because it had no context whatsoever. So then when I put in the more detailed prompt, which said, okay, using only the source material provided below, summarize the legal principles relating to unfair dismissal. If the source does not contain sufficient information to answer the question, say so explicitly. Okay, so this is basically giving it permission, like I mentioned, giving it permission to say, I don't know. Do not rely on general knowledge unless requested. Identify any assumptions you have made. Separate information taken directly from the source from any additional observations. So I've given it basically 3 links: the ACAS website, the government website, and another HR case law website, which is also like reliable. Okay, and the only reason I know these are reliable is because of my personal experience working in law. Okay, this is how you use your kind of judgment. So what has it come up with? Okay, so it's basically broken down the information and it's given me a better response than the last one. If I just go back to the last one, so it's given me kind of like the statutory test, and it's given me like just this bit of information here, like 2 paragraphs, which isn't a great deal of context, but also I didn't ask it for a great deal of context, right? So this is broken down even more detailed, and it's given me actually links to, okay, this is where it says it in the government website. This is where it says it on ACAS, which is super helpful. So it's broken it down for me. And then I just want to show you the bit which is extra helpful, is the bit where it says given additional information, which is helpful. This is the bit which I find brilliant. And this is where you distinguish a bad prompt from a good prompt, because you're able to kind of double check and review what it's done. So it says, okay, these are the assumptions I have made. So it's actually admitting its own kind of faults here, which I think is just hilarious. It's saying, I assume the ACAS guidance reflects the general legal framework. So it's like, okay, yeah, that's helpful. If I was an employment lawyer, I would be like, yeah, okay, I understand where its thought process, and this is correct because of X, Y, and Z. And it says, I did not assume any case law principles because they are not present in your sources. That's really helpful. It's like, thank you for not making up random cases and actually telling me that you couldn't find any because the sources I gave you didn't have any, even though they did. That's really, really helpful. Can you see the difference between when you ask it a few specific things, it can actually tell you where its gaps are, which helps you distinguish between hallucinations, and it just acting really, really confident. You know, in the first response, it gave me cases. In this response, it's saying, I've not given you any cases because I actually couldn't find any. And it's saying, okay, it did not assume any additional automatically unfair categories beyond those listed. Okay, that's really helpful. So I can kind of see its workings out as well. What the sources do not fully provide. Okay, so it didn't give me a breakdown of the act because I didn't give it to it, I guess. It was not in the sources that I gave it. It doesn't have any detailed legal tests, so that's helpful. So let's say I wanted these things. Let's say I wanted a breakdown of the act. I would go back to it and say, okay, what do you need from me that will help you give me a breakdown of the act? It's how do I help you help me type of scenario. And this is how you avoid and reduce the hallucinations as much as possible. So then after that, I'm going to show you now an even better prompt, which is even more helpful. Okay, so let me just show you more. And by the way, I did this before because I didn't want it to like stop working or something randomly whilst I was in the middle of showing you. So to reduce the risk of that, I asked it before, just before this training. Okay, so this prompt is a little bit more detailed and it has a little bit more specific information. So it says, using only the source material provided below, summarize the legal principles relating to unfair dismissal. Okay, the same question that I asked it in the previous one. I said, review the material provided and answer the question only using the information contained within these materials. Like I've mentioned before, this is a great way to ask it to just focus in on specific details and not make up random things. So this is how you help it reduce hallucinations even further. So I've given it the links that I gave it before, but I've given it just 2 additional ones, which is from LexisNexis and Citizens Advice, which are also reliable, reputable sources as well. So I said, for each key point, identify where it comes from, give me the link. So give me I want to double check the link and the source that you have checked. State your level of confidence. This is a key part of this prompt. Okay, state your level of confidence. Highlight any information that is unclear or missing. Again, a really key statement in this prompt. Explain any assumptions required to reach your conclusion. And if the materials do not support a conclusion, say to me, the information provided is insufficient to determine this. Again, giving it permission to say, I don't know. Okay, so what did it come up with? It came up with some really great information saying what unfair dismissal is. This information, it's given me the sources of where it's got that information. So it's done all the usual things. But what I want to show you here is for each section of the information that it gives me, for example, I'll give you this as an example, requirement for a fair reason. It's given me the legal principle. So a dismissal is generally only fair if the employer has a valid reason, such as conduct, capability, redundancy. It's given me the sources and it's told me how confident it is of its answer. So its level of confidence in this output. And then it said to me what is unclear or missing, which determines that level of confidence. So it said, the sources do not provide a complete or formal statutory list of fair reasons. Okay, that's interesting because I'm pretty sure it would do, but okay. It might be hallucinating here. I don't know. I would have to double check my sources. But let's say I'm 100% confident that the list does actually give the fair reasons list. Then I would go back to it and say, can you just double check that? Because I'm 100% confident that it actually does provide a list there, and then see what it says. Another way to kind of reduce this even more is putting in the initial prompt. Here are a list of sources. In these sources, you will find the key cases, the lists of, I don't know, reasons for unfair dismissal, and then give it a breakdown, an overview of what the sources actually say. So then it can't come back to you and say, oh no, that source didn't have any cases in it, because you're like, I'm pretty sure that it did. And okay, what else is it unclear on this one? They refer to fair reasons in general terms rather than like an exhausted list defining them. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what it means by that. Assumptions, I assume the list examples are illustrative rather than exhaustive. Okay, let's go to this other example because it says it's high confident. It has high confidence here on this response. So what is unclear about this? Okay, the exact procedural steps required are not fully detailed in the sources. Okay, that's probably true. Thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. Assumptions. I assumed fair procedure includes investigation, hearing, and appeal because these are implied in guidance terminology, but not fully defined. Okay, so there might be a gap here. This might be a blind spot. Remember the trust framework? There could be a blind spot in here. It's not got enough context. So maybe I need to go back to it and say, okay, here's a link to information that will actually clarify the fair procedure point for you. So that's helpful because it's something that I've not thought of, and a gap that it's actually told me and flagged for me. That's really, really helpful, rather than making up a random thing and saying, oh, the hearing and appeal process is this, because it's assumed from the information that I've given it. So can you see how actually this even better prompt will help you distinguish its level of confidence? Again, it could be, it could hallucinate massively, but at least you have a better idea of where it's got this information from and its justification for giving you this response. So then as the human, you can verify this. And this is, if you think about it, this is like a junior lawyer coming to you and being like, right, you've given me a policy document, instructions, case overview, all the things that I need. I've gone through them all. Here's my response. The only thing that I'm not sure about is this, because I'm making an assumption, but I don't have the actual facts, but I assume it's this. Am I correct in saying that? And, you know, imagine it, work with it like that, you know, like literally like a junior. So I love this prompt. This is, I think, extra helpful for lawyers. Okay, here's one where it said it's got low confidence. So it said, what is unclear here? Okay, the HR Inform page is a database listing. No specific principles are provided. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. LexisNexis provides definitions, but not case principles. That's true. Okay, I did not assume any specific case law principles, as none are present in the sources. Perfect. This is all we want, you know, we just want a bit of transparency. We don't want it to lie to us and make up stuff. Okay, so I guess the key here is don't ask the model, as in the AI, to be right. Ask it to be transparent about its uncertainty level, and that's what it does. That's literally what it does when you say to it. Another kind of example of a bad prompt: is this clause enforceable? You wouldn't just say that, you know, and just give it no context. Now that you've kind of learned thought process of AI and why it hallucinates and the frameworks, and we've given examples, you now know that it needs context. It needs you to fill those gaps for it. It needs sources. And in this sense, I would say create your own rules for the AI. So I've given you some examples of prompts here where you can literally just add the phrases of rate your confidence from low to high and give me any uncertainty that you have from this, and create a set of rules for the AI when you're going through it and asking it questions and asking for its output. Come up with things like, okay, here are your rules. Number 1, do this. Number 2, if you don't know, tell me this. Number 3, tell me your level of uncertainty. You know, like literally a list of rules that you can just feed the AI whenever you ask it a question or use it to help you. And you can also create, you know, an AI assistant, which will actually have this ingrained inside it. So you won't need to prompt it every time. So there's so many ways that you can do this. Okay, so just to summarize, the 3 things that I want you to take away from this session is your awareness of why LLMs, AI hallucinates. So the mindset behind it, and create the habit of actually double checking your prompts, your work, the hallucination, you know, level. And also I want you to kind of understand how to reduce hallucinations, what to say in your prompts, what to add in your prompts that will reduce the level of hallucinations. These are the 3 main takeaways that I want you to kind of consider for this. So yeah, thank you very, very much for coming to this training today. It's really, really nice to see you all, and I'm super grateful.